I sat at table number 8 stirring my iced tea and watching my daughter Sarah dance with her new husband. David was handsome, charming to the crowd, and holding Sarah just a little too tightly by the arm whenever they stepped off the dance floor. Most people saw a perfect newlywed's glow. I saw the way he checked the gift table every 15 minutes. My husband Richard passed away 5 years ago, leaving me a comfortable life. He always told me to watch how people treat the things they haven't earned. During the wedding planning, David had constantly hinted at upgrading the floral arrangements, mentioning how Sarah's mother is covering the bill anyway. He assumed I was a lonely, wealthy widow who would write blank checks just to keep my daughter happy. He was wrong. Before the reception, I made a quiet decision. I took the original envelope I had prepared for them, a generous check for a down payment on a house, and slid it back into my purse. Instead, I placed a second envelope in the card box. It contained a heartfelt letter and a modest gift card to a home goods store. I wanted to see how they would react when the money didn't flow like a river. Later that evening, while walking toward the restroom, I overheard David talking to his groomsmen in the hallway. "Don't worry about the credit card bill," David muttered, checking his watch. "The old lady's house is basically a gold mine. We're moving her into a retirement community by next month. Sarah is already on board." I stopped walking. My house. The home Richard and I built. I didn't confront them. I didn't cry. I simply walked out the side door, got into my car, and drove home. By the time the morning sun came up, my financial transition was already in motion. 3 days after the wedding, I was in my kitchen wiping down the counters when the front door swung open. I hadn't given them a key, which meant Sarah had copied my spare from the garage. They walked in carrying 2 large cardboard boxes and a tape measure. "Morning, Mom," Sarah chirped, dropping a box on the hardwood floor. "We thought we'd get a head start on the guest room." I set my dish towel down. A head start on what exactly? David walked right past me, pulling out his tape measure and eyeing the bay window in the living room. "Sarah and I were talking. This space is way too big for just you. We're going to move some of our stuff in here temporarily, just until we figure out the renovations. The guest room will make a great home office for me." He didn't ask. He stated it as a fact, looking at my living room like it was a property he had just won at auction. Sarah wouldn't meet my eyes. She busied herself adjusting the collar of her sweater. "You aren't moving anything into the guest room," I said, my voice steady. "This is my home. If you need storage, rent a unit." David chuckled, a condescending sound that grated on my nerves. "Come on, Janet. Be practical. You're getting older. You shouldn't be alone in this big place anyway. We're actually doing you a favor." I walked over to the box Sarah had dropped, picked it up, and handed it back to her. "The door is behind you. Take the box." David's smile vanished. He looked at Sarah, expecting her to intervene, but she just hugged the box to her chest, looking embarrassed. They left, but as David walked down the driveway, he threw a glare over his shoulder that promised he wasn't finished. I knew the real storm was just gathering. 1 week exactly after the wedding, I was out on the porch watering my ferns when a black sedan pulled into my driveway. David stepped out, followed by a man in a sharp gray suit carrying a leather briefcase. David marched up my steps with a smug grin. "Janet, this is Mr. Vance. He's an attorney." Mr. Vance didn't offer to shake my hand. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper, dropping it onto my small patio table. "Mrs. Richardson, I represent your son-in-law. You have 24 hours to vacate this property." I didn't flinch. I carefully turned off the watering can. "Is that so?" "Sarah's name is on the deed as a joint tenant," David interrupted, crossing his arms. "We checked the county records from when Richard died. We're exercising our right to occupy the property. We've already found a very nice assisted living facility for you. If you aren't packing by tomorrow, we'll make this difficult." He thought I was a broke, ignorant widow who would crumble at the sight of a suit. He thought the county records he looked up online were the final word. I picked up the piece of paper, glanced at the generic legal jargon, and handed it back to the man in the suit. You should check your client's facts, Mr. Vance. That joint tenancy was dissolved 3 years ago when I transferred this property into a private living trust. I am the sole trustee. Sarah has no ownership of this house. David's face lost its color. That's a lie. Sarah assumes, I corrected him. And you assumed. Now get off my porch before I turn the hose back on. Mr. Vance looked at David, visibly annoyed at being dragged into a bluff that just fell apart. David opened his mouth to argue, but I stepped inside and shut the heavy oak door in his face. It was time to cut the remaining strings. I didn't waste time worrying about David's threats. I knew men like him. When intimidation fails, they scramble for resources. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, sat at the kitchen island, and opened my laptop. For years, I had kept a joint checking account with Sarah. It was a remnant from her college days meant for emergencies. I usually kept about $10,000 in it. I logged into my banking portal. Sure enough, there were 3 pending transactions from the night before charges for a luxury furniture store and a travel agency totaling almost $8,000. David was spending my money to furnish the home he planned to steal from me. With 3 clicks, I canceled the pending transactions. I transferred the entire balance of the account into my private single-owner savings account. Then I closed the joint account completely. Next, I opened the family phone plan. I selected Sarah's number and hit Suspend Service. I did the same for the emergency credit card she kept in her wallet. I wasn't doing this to be cruel. I was establishing the boundary they had tried to bulldoze. You do not get to plot against my independence and still live on my dime. At noon, a locksmith arrived. I had him change the deadbolts on the front, back, and garage doors. I watched him install the heavy brass locks, feeling a profound sense of peace settling over the house. The smell of fresh coffee and lemon polish returned, no longer tainted by the anxiety of an uninvited intrusion. By 3:00 p.m., my house was fully secured. My money was entirely out of their reach. I sat down with a book, waiting for the inevitable explosion. It didn't take long for the quiet afternoon to shatter. The landline rang at exactly 4:15 p.m. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Mom, what is going on? Sarah's voice was high-pitched, bordering on frantic. I'm at the grocery store and my card was declined, and my phone says no service. I had to borrow the manager's phone to call you. I closed the joint account, Sarah, I answered calmly, turning a page of my book. I also canceled the emergency credit card and removed you from the phone plan. What? Why would you do that without telling me? Because you and your husband showed up at my house with a man in a suit threatening to throw me out of my own home, I said, keeping my tone perfectly even. Did you really think I would continue to fund your lifestyle after that? David said it was just a formality. She pleaded, clearly panicked. He said the house was legally ours and we just needed to speed up the transition because we have debt, Mom. We're drowning. I paused. David's debt is not my responsibility, and my home is not your collateral. There was a muffled sound, and then David's voice barked through the receiver. Listen to me, you stubborn old woman. We have bills to pay. You are going to transfer that money back right now, or I swear. Or what, David? I interrupted. You'll send another fake lawyer. You'll try to move into a house you don't have the keys to. You are a grown man. Pay your own bills. I hung up the phone and unplugged it from the wall. Let them sit in the reality of their own choices. I went to the kitchen to prepare dinner, feeling lighter than I had in months. But I knew David wouldn't just give up. The next morning, I went out to the garage to tidy up. Richard's old workbench was still there, along with a few boxes Sarah had stored years ago. Now that she had made her allegiances clear, I didn't want her clutter taking up my space. I pulled the boxes down. Most of it was old college textbooks and cheap decor. But at the bottom of the second box, I found a leather binder with David's name embossed on it. He must have left it here during the wedding chaos when they used my garage for staging the decorations. I'm not usually one to snoop, but after yesterday's stunt, my rules had changed. I opened the binder. It was full of financial statements, credit card bills with balances in the tens of thousands, letters from collection agencies, a notice of default on David's sports car, and most revealing of all, a handwritten budget plan titled Post-Wedding Strategy. Under the income column, he had listed sell Janet's house east, 450Ks, empty joint account, 10K. He had married my daughter to liquidate me. He didn't love Sarah. He loved the proximity to my assets. He needed my house to save himself from total ruin. I stared at the paper, feeling a cold wave of disgust wash over me. Sarah was foolish and greedy, but she was also being used by a desperate man. I closed the binder. I didn't need to call the police. I didn't need to hire a lawyer to fight him. I had the only weapon that mattered: absolute control over the purse strings. I packed all of Sarah's remaining belongings along with David's binder into 3 neat boxes and stacked them by the front door. The final delivery was ready. At noon, a silver car pulled up aggressively to my curb. David stormed out, face flushed with anger. Sarah trailed behind him, looking exhausted and anxious. They stomped up the steps, and David aggressively twisted the doorknob. It didn't budge. He pounded his fist against the wood. "Open this door, Janet." I unlocked it but kept the chain engaged, opening it just a few inches. "Keep your voice down on my property, David. You changed the locks. Are you insane?" he yelled, pointing a finger at the crack in the door. "You have no right to do this to us. Sarah is your daughter. And you are a financial parasite," I replied. I undid the chain, stepped out onto this porch, and quickly closed the door behind me, locking it. I pushed the 3 boxes toward them with my foot. "What is this?" Sarah asked, staring at the boxes. "The last of your things," I said. I picked up the leather binder from the top box and held it out. David's eyes went wide. He reached for it, but I pulled it back slightly. "I found your post-wedding strategy, David. I know about the car. I know about the collections." I turned to my daughter. "Did you know he was $40,000 in debt before he even bought your engagement ring?" Sarah looked at David, her mouth opening and closing. "David, is that true?" David snatched the binder from my hand, his face a mask of panic and rage. "She's lying. She's just trying to turn you against me because she's a selfish old woman who won't help her own family." "I help my family," I said quietly. "I don't fund frauds." Sarah stood frozen on the porch, looking between her furious husband and the boxes of her old life. "Sarah, let's go." David snapped, grabbing one of the boxes. "We don't need her. We'll figure it out. We're not playing her games anymore. Figure it out, how—" Sarah's voice cracked. "My card is declined, David. We can't even buy groceries right now. What do you mean you were $40,000 in debt?" David shoved the box into her arms. "Stop acting like a victim in front of her. We are a team. Get in the car." I watched my daughter. I had raised her to be independent, but somewhere along the line, she had traded her spine for the illusion of a perfect relationship. I stepped forward, maintaining my distance from David. "Sarah," I said firmly, "you have a choice right now. You can get in that car with a man who planned to throw your mother out on the street to pay off his bad debts. Or you can leave those boxes here, walk away from him, and figure out how to stand on your own 2 feet. But if you leave with him today, do not expect another dime from me. Ever." David laughed harshly. You hear that she's bribing you. She wants to control you just like she controls everything else. No, I corrected him. I am protecting what is mine. Sarah's life is her own. Sarah looked at the binder in David's hand. She looked at my house standing solid and quiet behind me. Then she looked at the pavement. I'm his wife, Mom. She whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. I have to stand by him. I felt a sharp ache in my chest, but I didn't let it show. I nodded once. Then take your boxes. I stood on the porch and watched them load the boxes into the trunk of their car. David slammed the lid shut with unnecessary force. He got into the driver's seat and revved the engine. Sarah got in the passenger side, staring straight ahead. She didn't look back as they drove away. I went back inside and locked the door. The house was entirely silent. For a brief moment, the quiet felt heavy. I had just watched my only daughter choose a sinking ship over solid ground. A part of me wanted to cry to call her back and offer to pay off the debt just to keep her close. But I remembered Richard's voice. Watch how people treat the things they haven't earned. If I had paid David's debts, he would have learned nothing, and Sarah would have remained a hostage to his financial disasters. By cutting them off, I had forced reality into their laps. They couldn't hide behind my bank accounts anymore. I walked it into the kitchen, picked up the kettle, and filled it with water. I turned on the stove and watched the blue flame ignite. I didn't need to win an argument. I didn't need to destroy them in court. I just needed to secure my perimeter. I took my tea to the living room and sat in my favorite armchair. The afternoon sun was streaming through the bay window, the exact window David had wanted to put a desk in front of. I took a sip of the hot tea. The heavy silence began to feel different. It no longer felt lonely. It felt like peace. 6 months passed. The seasons changed and the leaves in my front yard turned a brilliant shade of gold. I hired a local contractor to renovate the guest room, not for a home office, but into an art studio for myself. I started painting again, a hobby I had abandoned years ago. I heard updates about Sarah through a mutual family friend. The reality of David's financial mess had hit them hard. Without my money to cushion the blow, his car was repossessed. They were renting a tiny one-bedroom apartment across town. The marriage was reportedly under immense strain, stripped of the luxury David thought he was marrying into. One Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Sarah's number. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Her voice sounded tired, devoid of the entitlement she had worn at the wedding. She told me she had gotten a second job to help pay the bills. She said she missed me. She didn't ask for money. I listened to the message twice. I didn't call her back immediately. Healing takes time and boundaries require maintenance. I was glad she was working, glad she was finally facing the real world. Perhaps one day, when she had fully untangled herself from David's toxic grip, we could have a cup of coffee. But on my terms, in neutral territory. I deleted the voicemail, picked up my paintbrush, and turned back to my canvas. They had thought my kindness was a weakness. They thought my age made me an easy target. But this house was mine. This peace was mine. And for the first time in a long time, my future was entirely my own.